She was one of the most searched names on the internet. A girl the world thought it knew, but never really did. She was labeled, judged, and objectified. But beneath the viral headlines was a young woman, crying silently behind a screen. This is not the story of a scandal. This is the story of a human being, torn between cultures, haunted by choices, and still searching for peace. This is the real Mia Khalifa. Before the headlines. Before the controversy. Before the name Mia Khalifa became a whisper in the search bars across the world. There was just Sarah, a quiet girl growing up in a world of bombs, culture, and dreams. Sarah was born in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, in 1993. Her early life was framed by complexity, in a world filled with tradition, but shadowed by conflict. Her family, Maronite Christians, lived quietly amidst political instability. She attended Catholic school, wore long sleeves under a blazing sun, and listened to whispers about war more than whispers about dreams. In Sarah's childhood, words had weight, silence was safer, and identity was not something to be expressed, it was something to be protected. Her family left Lebanon for America in search of peace. But what awaited there was something else entirely, which is a new kind of war. The war of identity. In Maryland winter, the air is cold and unfamiliar, and so is the language. Her name is still Sarah, but the world around her doesn't know how to pronounce it. The moment her family stepped onto American soil, they were no longer immigrants, they were outsiders. Back in Beirut, fear came from the sound of sirens. But in Maryland, fear wore a different face: loneliness. Young Sarah enrolled in elementary school without knowing a word of English. The other children laughed at her accent. Teachers misread her silence for disobedience. And for the first time, she questioned not just where she came from, but who she was allowed to become. She tried to adapt. She stopped bringing her Lebanese lunch to school, too many stairs. She learned to say her name like Americans did, flat, fast, and forgettable. The process wasn't just survival. It was erasure. By the time she was a teenager, Sarah had become invisible. Not because no one saw her, but because she had built herself to blend in. At home, she was expected to be the perfect Middle Eastern daughter, modest, obedient, and private. But outside those walls, the rules changed. She discovered a different culture. One with no limits and no filters. Social media gave her a window and a mask. On MySpace, she was bold. On Facebook, flirtatious. And on Instagram, a girl who smiled into the lens, even when her eyes screamed something else. She wore the contradictions like armor, hijab in family portraits, push-up bras in private messages. Each side of her identity pulling in a different direction. And no one stopped to ask, which version is real? But the truth is, they all were. She was not a lie, she was layers. Each molded by expectation, pressure, and the fear of never being enough. College seemed like a new chapter in Sarah's life, that gave her a chance to breathe. She studied history. She worked side jobs, and she tried to disappear into the noise of campus life. But even then, she carried something heavy. A quiet desperation to be seen, to be wanted, and to be in control of how the world looked at her. So when someone offered her a quick photo shoot, she said yes. And the girl who had spent her life trying to erase herself from labels was about to be branded forever. It was a quiet and forgettable Tuesday. Sarah wore a hoodie, jeans, and an expression that said, "I've made up my mind." The room was small. The lights are bright. And the paperwork is signed. She wasn't coerced. But she wasn't free either. Not from self-doubt. Not from the weight of needing to feel seen. Finally, completely. The name they gave her wasn't hers. Mia Khalifa. It sounded bold, exotic, and sellable. It was a costume stitched from two cultures that had already ripped her apart. In 3 months, Mia Khalifa filmed just 11 scenes. 11. And yet, those few minutes of footage would brand her forever, not just in search engines, but in minds, families, and governments. One of the videos, the most controversial, featured her wearing a hijab, a thin scarf meant for modesty, used in a scene designed for provocation. It was a marketing stunt by the studio, but the target on her back grew bigger than any headline. The reactions were instant. Many death threats flooded in from across the globe. ISIS tweeted her coordinates. Her homeland disowned her publicly. And for the first time, the young woman who had always felt invisible now wished she was. And yet, the world kept watching. Greater than 10 million searches in a week. Greater than 30 million by the end of the month. Her name surged to the top of the charts, not for talent, not for truth, but for fantasy and outrage. She made no more videos. But the algorithm didn't care. Her face, her name, her body, recycled endlessly. Profited on by a system that had no mercy and no expiration date. She left the industry almost as quickly as she entered. But the internet is a machine that doesn't understand stop. It memorizes. It repeats. And it never forgives. The people who clicked never asked about her past. They didn't care what it cost her. What it cost her parents. What it cost her mental health. Because to the world, she was not Sarah. Not a daughter. Not a 21-year-old in search of herself. She was a brand. A mistake. A meme. There were moments Sarah thought it might all end. The silence between threats was the loudest. Her friends disappeared. Her family withdrew. And doors closed. But from within the fire, she didn't burn. She began to build. She left that chapter. Not proud of it. Not hiding it. But carrying it like a scar. Visible, but no longer bleeding. And slowly, she began to speak. Mia Khalifa left the industry in 2015. But it never left her. Because when the internet decides who you are, it never asks for permission. The scenes were behind her. The contracts torn. But each time she Googled her name, she saw a past she could no longer outrun. The studios still owned the footage, still monetized the searches, and still sold her image over and over, while she got nothing but regret. She tried to move on, found a job at a law firm, worked at the reception, wrote resumes, and tried to live quietly. But customers recognized her. Some laughed, others whispered, and some came in just to see if it was really her. There was no normal anymore. No safe place. Her face was a brand she couldn't erase, and she no longer controlled it. She tried to speak out, told interviewers the truth, that it wasn't empowering, that it wasn't glamorous, that the fame came like a weapon, not a reward. And people listened, but they didn't stop searching. Her voice was brave, but the clicks were louder. Back home, the silence from her culture was deafening. Her family, overwhelmed by shame and grief, they stepped back. The country that once shaped her childhood had now buried her in disgrace. She was trapped, not in a contract, but in an identity that no longer felt hers. A public figure without ownership. A face without a future. She cried. She broke. She thought of ending it. But she didn't. Because pain, too, can become purpose. She turned her story inward and began to fight back. Not with anger, but with truth. She exposed the way the adult industry treats young women, especially those unaware of how permanent their decisions will become. She demanded her videos to be removed. She filed takedown requests. She wrote, posted, spoke, again and again. And in doing so, the woman the internet once mocked became a voice the world couldn't ignore. There's a moment in every storm when the sky doesn't clear, but the thunder begins to quiet. That moment is when healing begins. She could have stayed quiet, could have hidden, could have even let the world write the ending. But instead, she took the pen back. Mia Khalifa, the name once drenched in controversy, became a platform. Not for fame, not for followers, but for truth. She began to speak, not as a victim, but as a woman who had lived through the very worst kind of spotlight and refused to be defined by it. She called out the adult industry for exploiting young women with contracts they barely understood. She revealed the emotional manipulation and the irreversible impact of content made in your early 20s, living forever in your 30s, 40s, and beyond. She fought to have her videos removed, filed legal complaints, challenged the platforms that profited off her image while she got nothing but pain. And slowly, the world began to listen. She became a symbol of digital consequence, a living reminder that what we consume online affects real lives. Her fight wasn't just about the past. It was about identity, about reclaiming a self that had been stolen by headlines, by browsers, and by assumptions. She started building a life she chose, on her own terms, unfiltered and unapologetic. She embraced humor, made fun of her old self before others could. She posted about heartbreak, therapy, books, and dogs. She was raw, and for the first time, real. Not the girl the internet watched, not the character in a browser window, but the woman who survived all of it. Her power wasn't in what she showed, it was in what she shared. There are names that we're given, names we earn, and names we fight to take back. For the world, she will always be Mia Khalifa. The most searched, the most judged, and the misunderstood. But behind that name is Sarah, a woman born in Beirut, raised in contradiction, and rebuilt in the ashes of shame. She didn't ask to be a symbol, didn't ask to be hated, desired, feared, mocked, or worshipped. She just wanted to be seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. Her name was weaponized. Her body became currency, and her past is used as ammunition in every argument about morality and memory. But even so, she stood, scarred. Yes. But never silent. Today, she uses that name, not to perform, but to educate, to challenge the digital world we've built, to ask us, what do we do with the people we turn into symbols? What happens when the viral moment ends, and the human remains? She is not perfect. She never claimed to be. But she is real. And sometimes, that is enough. Mia Khalifa, once the most searched name on the internet. Now, simply, a woman who lived through it, and lived to tell the truth. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button for more interesting videos like this.